You love Newzroom Afrika special edition tonight on News at Prime, focusing on the July unrest a year on. Who is accountable? That's just one of the questions we'll try and get behind as we bring you 3 hours of tonight's special coverage. We'll also look at the case of prosecutions. Who has been convicted for what the president described as an insurrection? And what are the lessons that have been learned? To kick off our coverage tonight, we take you live now to my colleague and Newsfeed AM anchor, Xoli Mngambi. He's live in the province that really became the central focus of not just discussion but also investigation. That's KZN. Xoli Mngambi, good evening to you. A year on, and that community still reeling from the aftermath of that July unrest, and unfortunately what would then happen to be compounding problems, including things like the floods that they've been battling.
Kathy, a very good evening to you. We are coming to you live from the community of Phoenix and the stretch of road, if you are able to see behind me. It's called Champion Road. Kathy, this is where the roadblocks were mounted by some members of this community who were worried about their businesses. And so, whilst mounting those roadblocks, well, the story that has been told over a number of months that then occurred in South Africa, as we reflect back at that time, you will remember that Phoenix became a key talking point. Basically, some people holding the view that a massacre occurred here because in those roadblocks, this is where some of the community members decided that they were going to carry out what has been seen as extrajudicial killings, where if you were black, you were simply identified to have been either part of the looters or you perhaps were up to no good, and the community dealt with you the best way that they knew how. And with me, Kathy, to reflect back on that day, I have someone who is a victim of what occurred there. His name is Mzwandile Magwaza. He was with a group of friends traveling in a twin cab, in a motor vehicle that's a van. It's called a twin cab nowadays, and the story of what occurred that day, he's going to reflect on us. He's going to speak to us in isiZulu because that's the language he expresses himself best. Let's talk to him now. Baba Magwaza, siyabonga ngesikhathi sakho. Uma sila ePhoenix namhlanje and lo mgwaqo lo, uChampion Road. Yini oyicabangayo ngalo lasuku? Kwakumhla ka-12.
Kwakumhla ka-12 ubhuti kulezi khathi kwakungabo kwala 2:05 ntambama. Savukelwa iqulu lamandiya ayekake umgwaqo ephethe ibhame, ephethe imbazo, ephethe ucelemba, acela ukuchecka imoto yethu. Kuyilapho-ke kwalahleka khona imphefumulo yabanye abafuthi angangihamba nabo. Abanye namanje abakakwazi ukuzenzela into afanele bazenzele yona, abakasevani namanje impilo zabo basafayitha ngokwezimpilo zabo.
Uthi kwalahleka imphefumulo, nani bangake emoteni, bangake abashona, bangake abalimala?
Sasiba u7 or 9. Ukuthi angisazi ukuthi ngemumva ebhakini kwakuhlele abantu abangaki, kodwa khona ngikabakhumbula ngokwamagama mangase ngithole ithuba lokubasho ngokwamagama. Kodwa lapha ngaphambili sasiyiqemba ka-driver, u-driver no-crew wakhe ngaphambili. Yeah. Kwalahleka imphefumulo yabathathu.
Wena awuzange ulimala?
Ngalimala la engalweni, ngalimala la esweni, ngalimala la ekhanda. Yeah.
Ngiyabona bhuti Mzwandile ukuthi namhlanje angiboni ukuthi uzizwa kahle uma sengisho ke nje manje ekuhlaleni, ngoba uhamba nje ugaxile. Yini eyenza ukuthi uhamba uphethe isibhamu?
Ikakhulukazi mengiza ngapha kulezi ndawo la ePhoenix, ngeke ngikhumbule ukuthi sasingahlomanga ngalutho ngalela la, ngoba sasingalindele ukuthi khona into eyimpe engasehlela, kodwa sasuka sesivukelwa zigebengu endleleni. Kungakho-ke mengiza ngapha ngeke ngiqinisekise ukuthi kumele ngiphelele njengendoda ngampela ukuze kumele kungiphinde ukufana nalokhuya ngikwazi ukuyivikela, ngoba ngalela la ngikwazanga ukuyivikela, ngikwazanga nokuvikela ikenga engihamba nayo.
Siyabonga bhuti Mzwandile. Kathy, just to quickly explain what Mzwandile was saying there in isiZulu, he says that 9 people were in the motor vehicle they were traveling in, and 3 of those 9, their lives were lost on this very stretch of road. And I asked him the question, so is that the reason why today you travel around with a firearm? If you look closer to his body, he is carrying a firearm, and he says, well, I don't know what could happen if anything like that were to ever occur again. I have to defend myself. Let's speak now to a government official. He is the MEC of Economic Development in KwaZulu-Natal. His name is Mr. Ravi Pillay. MEC, thank you very much for your time. We're going to talk about the economic effects of what happened in KZN. But let's start with the lives that were lost here. I remember distinctly your words at the Human Rights Commission. You said what occurred in this community specifically was not a massacre. But I've just retold the story of Mzwandile here, along with his friends. 3 of them died. When you look back at what occurred in this community specifically, do you still stick with your story that it wasn't a massacre?
Well, thank you very much. I think, firstly, I think it will be appropriate to convey sympathies and condolences to Mr. Magwaza and his friends or relatives or work colleagues who were victims of that particular incident, as were many others. In fact, we were at pains in that presentation you speak about to make it very clear that there were a number of people who were involved in racial profiling and violence which was simply not acceptable. It was a type of violence that revealed prejudice and anger that needs to be dealt with. At the first level, the law needs to take its course, but it's also indicative of a deeper legacy of our past and the divisions that we have. I think how you want to characterize it, I think that's something, let's see what the Commission comes out with. I think the point there was that there was not enough data on place, time and space in order to give it a characterization, and also in a way that does not inflame and perpetuate the division. The submission we made was towards nation building.
Yeah.
At the beginning and the end of that particular submission, and I think all those who were party to that submission have their own track records as far as building a truly non-racial society is concerned.
Yeah.
So I think what must not be done is underestimate the pain that many people feel. Some of the videos that went around and it reinforces a feeling of a dehumanizing action, the way it was done. And that cannot be tolerated. That must be called out for what it was. But at the same time, we say we don't stereotype an entire community. And I think that's the focus we want to place on our nation-building efforts.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I think we must face the truth, whatever the facts of each particular case were, and I think that is a work in progress.
MEC, without dwelling much, because time is against us, this particular community, it bears a special responsibility, I would like to put it, because when you talk about nation building, it's probably got to start here. How much effort has gone into uniting, therefore, the Indian community that resides in Phoenix, along with the surrounding black communities that are around this area or that surround this area?
Not enough. I think this has to be a long-term effort. I think the wounds are still deep, so we need to find ways in which people are even prepared to talk openly about it. It doesn't mean there have been no efforts. The Premier has been on the front line, and we'll be the first to say, but it's important to have symbolic efforts. So when last year we had the march from here to the Bombay ground bearing the messages of nation building, that's the kind of symbolic action that's necessary, but we need to drill down deeper. The Premier's office is involved with programs that's dealing with each family that lost members. I think on Friday he was part of a press conference where he reported partially on that, and reported that when they proposed a kind of symbolic monument of sorts, some members who say no, look, they don't think that's necessary. They'd rather receive compensation to put their lives together. So that's the conversation that's happening between Office of the Premier. But in addition to that, I think there are a lot of civil society groups who are using sport, for example, young children under 15, interracial, mixing the teams and having sport. I mean, and then, of course, church groups having programs. They're trying to bring people together. I think it's still fragmented. We need to make it a bit more comprehensive, and I'm sure that will happen in due course.
MEC, my apologies. I'm going to have to link back to studio because of time constraints. I'm hoping that Kathy will be kind to us and hopefully come back to us at some point. But Kathy, you have heard the two sides there. Let's take a short break now. When we return, Ziyanda Ngobo, who is also in KZN looking at another aspect of the July unrest, she'll pick up shortly after this.